everyone. Welcome to the Collecting Scars podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Whether this is your first time tuning in or you've listened to every single episode, I really do appreciate that you're here. It means the world to me. And today is just a great day. It's beautiful out, the sun is shining, and I've just got so much to be grateful for in this moment. And I just wanted to send out that invitation for you as well to take stock of some of the things that you're just like, wow, I dreamt about this 5 years ago and now I'm living it. And if you're not there yet, that's okay, but maybe there's something there that's even like the direction of your dreams that you can be grateful for in this moment. And like I said, my invitation for you is to just notice it, notice the progress, notice how far you've come. And it really just helps to shift your mood. So just wanted to put that out there in case anyone needs it. Today's episode is really fun. It's with Max Henry, who is such a legend in parkour. He is, I would say, one of the best technique people in our sport. He is so fun to watch. I think my way of describing the way he trains is it's just like he knows exactly how much effort to give and when. That's something I really enjoy watching with him. He's just got so much control, but then so much power and execution. Like his rail pre's are just mwah, chef's kiss. And I've been lucky enough to know Max for the past 10 years. It's so crazy how quickly time flies, but in this episode, we get into a bunch of different things. We do talk a lot about parkour, so I know that I have some listeners that aren't from the parkour world, so some of it may be a little bit confusing. However, we do talk a lot about his experience with van life and parenthood and everything in the middle and just kind of what it's like to commit to a sport for 19 years and his mentality into training, which is very different than mine. And also we did an episode together on his podcast called the Takeoff Pod. So if you guys want to listen to that, I'll definitely put a link to that one in the description so you guys can listen to that one as well. But I loved this episode. I felt like it was a really meaningful one with Max. I know him quite well, but I don't know the depths of his story. And like I said, his mentality of training is just so different to mine because mine has always been rooted in like creating stakes for myself and pushing myself in a certain way. But then for him, he's got this mentality where he says like nothing in parkour really needs to be done. And we get into why that's actually a really powerful way to think about it and how taking the pressure off can actually just accelerate your training in another way. All I can say is that some of my best sessions I've ever had have been with Max Henry and Christine Henry, his wife. I just love the both of them. I absolutely adore them. So anyway, I just want to thank you so much, Max, for being on this episode with me. Like I said, really, really enjoyed getting to talk to him and get to know him. And I hope you guys enjoy it too. And thank you so much for listening today. And let's get right into it.
Just had an oat cortado. I'm ready to roll.
Oh, I am jealous of that. I went to a coffee shop earlier, actually. The one I wanted to go to was way too busy. So I went to a new place and I was like, hey, can I get an oat flat white? And then they're like, yeah, what size? And then I said, I'll just have a latte.
I'm good. You answered incorrectly by asking what size. Yeah.
Max Henry, thank you so much for joining me on Collecting Scars today. It is seriously such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, we got to do a podcast on the Takeoff Pod, which is yours. And I had such a great conversation with you on there. It was really fun to get to kind of dive into my story. But now we're going to dive more into yours. And I realized like I know quite a bit of things about you, but then there's still so much that I just don't. So first, I want to start off by saying I believe that we met in 2016, which is funny. Everyone's doing the 2016 throwback. And
Yeah.
I believe that you were at Beast Coast. I don't think we talked, but I remember really well that when we were at Apex International in Colorado, you had your van and you had lost the odds and there was a free candy sign.
Oh no, this is how we're starting. We're starting at one of my low moments. Yeah, so that was Roland Hannigan, who at that time I had known from Minnesota because he's from Minneapolis area. And was, can I curse on here? Is that acceptable? As long as my daughter's not listening. Yeah, he was a little shit starter back in the day. And now it's funny because he has become a lot more prevalent in the community, and which is very cool to see. But yeah, he at Jump Fest that year in 2016 had given me, it was something like 1 in 100 odds to put a free candy sign on my white Ford van, which I had been living in. And Yeah, I unfortunately lost the odds. Did not at the time realize how in poor taste that was until I was driving through Yellowstone and a woman pulled up next to me while I was in the parking lot and said, my daughter was one of the lucky few who was abducted and then was found within 24 hours. And I just wanted to let you know that you pass people on the street probably every day who've had this tragedy happen to them and are reminded. And it was like oh my goodness, this is not just a joke that dumb 20-year-old, 14 to 20-year-old boys are making, but this is an actual thing, a horrible thing that happens. And as a dad now, it's like looking back, yeah, uh, horrible thing that happened and in incredibly poor taste. But unfortunately, that is an accurate representation of where I was at in 2016.
Oh
Thankfully, I've grown.
oh my God. Okay, I had no idea it had that kind of an impact.
Yeah. No, it was one of those like there's some moments where you're kind of glad that people speak up throughout your life because they push you to mature, particularly as a young athletic white man who was benefiting from a lot of people looking the other way and just enjoying my life, not having to think too much as I went through it. And that was one of those where it was an eye-opening thing.
I mean, it's an eye-opening thing for me now. It's yeah, it's hard because you never think about like how people might perceive and like things that people have gone through, and then that's just like a funny joke that you lose the odds with your friends. And I remember thinking it was funny when I saw it. I was like, that's funny because everything I had heard about Max Henry is he's so chill, he's so sweet, he's like so not that person. And so having that,
Yeah.
it was brutal.
Yeah, no, sorry to start that off with I mean, it's like a funny and bummer thing. It's a good reminder that like it's funny till it's not, or one of those situations where you realize as you get older too that you're like, oh wow, cool. Like 100 people might be entertained by this, but is that worth the one person who's going to be devastated by it? Like probably not.
Yeah, it just goes to show. I mean, I don't think about that stuff enough sometimes. And then sometimes I think about it too much and then I just don't do anything. Like I get afraid of offending people, but that's a conversation for another time. I would love to actually just start off talking about the van life. How long did you do that for?
Yeah, I was in and out of the van so I graduated college in 2014. I had just finished working on Tracers, the parkour film. And yeah, I had some extra cash from that. And I put most of it into buying a beat up old Ford van. I'd seen the first Alex Honnold climbing documentary. So pre solo, when he sold Half Dome, there was a doc that went out then that was mostly on YouTube and in the climbing community. And I saw that and he like went super in depth into his van. And at the time, it was kind of like right around when van life was starting to pick up. But I remember in 2014 not seeing a ton of people on the road that had kitted their vans out and nobody was doing it in parkour. And I was like, oh, that seems pretty awesome. I just graduated from college, don't have much else going on, might as well give it a try. And yeah, so I did that until 2018. And I split my time. So I would usually coach with the Movement Creative, which is a parkour company in New York City. So I'd come home, hang out at my parents' place, sleep in the basement for a month or two, coach for whatever, 40 hours a week, try and make enough money to then go out and be on the road for as long as I could. So I'd usually be out on the road for 6 to 9 months at a time. And then I'd come back for a month or two and try and like coordinate it around the holidays or something like that. And it was a blast. I mean, I think I went cross country if you count north, south, and east, west in the US. So I did every major interstate route, north, south, and east, west, in 4 years. I think I went cross country like 12 or 13 times. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. What do you think the most valuable lessons that you learned from that time are?
Internally, like lessons I learned about myself or lessons I learned about other people or the
Both.
world
Both.
or both. Both. I think something I learned about myself is that I don't actually do well with isolation. Um, I learned that I really rely a lot on social interaction. And I think I realized that I'm a lot more extroverted than I had given myself credit for. So some of the times that I'd be driving, and there were a couple times where like you don't talk to another person going especially like there was a long stretch where I drove from New Orleans to California. And when you're just going through Texas and like long 12, 15-hour driving days through the desert or up north going through like Montana, Dakotas and stuff, you just have no reason to talk to people for 2, 3, 4 days. And then sometimes I'd also combine that with like camping or hiking. And there were a few times where I probably didn't talk to a person for 5, 6, 7 days in a row. And it was rough on me. Like some people love it. And I'm glad I did it because I, you know, got something out of it that I wouldn't have otherwise. But I also got out of it that that's not my ideal state of existence. And actually, my best times like were inviting friends to come and stay with me. So like I had Tam travel with me for a little bit. Sam Wood from the Missoula, Montana community came and traveled with me for a little bit. Just random people, I'd like pick them up and we'd go into a jam. And like, as long as you don't, Joel Egeman was actually the best because he's like 6'5", and my bed barely fit me. So we had to like stack my Yeti cooler to get his feet up onto it. And it's like two grown men, right? Like sleeping next to each other in this tiny Ford Econoline van, like barely enough room. Poor Joel's like, diagonal across me. And that was a great trip. But yeah, it was a good opportunity to learn some stuff about myself. And then I think externally, I think I just really appreciated seeing the diversity of the country, just getting to see how folks live their life, like especially because it was in the context of parkour, but getting to spend a little more time everywhere, like the parkour community, which is where I've spent so much time, feels really monolithic. Like everybody feels kind of similar, and there's like a shared culture when you spend especially like a little bit of time with them, or you're all at a jam. But when you get to like go to somebody's home spot, or you're hanging out with their family or their close friends or whatever for a week, like getting to go from New Orleans and meeting those guys and doing like crawdad boil and meeting their folks and hearing these like thick Cajun accents, and then going to Texas and having like barbecue with DJ or like AJ Aljafria and Jared Ludi. And then you go to, California, and all of a sudden you're like sleeping in a Home Depot parking lot, dodging cops, and then spending the afternoon at Tempest, like looking at famous athletes walking in and out of the gym, or actors or whatever. And getting to just travel all over the world and kind of see, how similar the communities were, but how they all had their own different flavor, and appreciating how like that's what makes it such an interesting community. And also something that I actually was like, I found pretty foundational in my interest in storytelling and travel in general, was like getting a deeper view into these people's lives and suddenly feeling like I want to share more of actually what makes these people different, versus just emphasizing what we do a lot in parkour, which is kind of like the similarities that we all share in this international community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow. Those are some amazing lessons, and getting to travel across the country like that sounds incredible. But I can also see where it's just so hard. I really wanted to do that until I realized like I actually don't think that's for me either. I think that it'd be fun for a couple days, but I don't know if I could do that for weeks on end, if not months on end. I'm sure you get used to it and stuff. But there was actually just something quick I wanted to touch on that you said, and you were talking about how like parkour people are kind of monolithic and there's a lot of similarities. I was at the gym earlier, and during open gym, we get a lot of like stunt performers in the mornings. And there was a guy that walked in. I knew he was a parkour guy. I've never seen him in my life, but I just knew. I'm like, he does parkour. And I couldn't put my finger on why. And he was. So I was just wondering if you ever noticed that, and like what your take is on that. Cause I feel like you would know.
Yeah, there's definitely a vibe. There's a vibe check. It changes a little bit, but I think it's just the way that people in the sport carry themselves, how they kind of look at stuff, like their eyes linger on weird things that if you do parkour, you understand what they're looking at or what they're thinking about. And if you don't do parkour, probably is very confusing. And I get that in different action sports. If you're hanging out with skateboarders or whatever, it's like everybody perceives the world through like a different lens. And I think that shared lens is what defines a lot of the similarities in parkour culture. And then there's like shared clothing, and I think like body language and how people kind of communicate, that sort of is like the acceptable common language or common like cultural space that we share. And yeah, I think it's a cool space, and I really like it. But to your point, it's also really cool when you get to see people in their own element and see like how that shared space is authentic to them, but then they also have parts of themselves that maybe they don't uh, expose or don't share in the context of like a big jam or going to open jam or whatever it is.
Yeah, I'd love to know kind of what makes you different. I mean, I know that there is a difference, and I'm thinking in general vibe. I think it's kind of what we talked about before too in the last podcast where you said that you you live on the borderline of complacency, but I see it as more like Max is really chill, and I don't know if all parkour athletes are just really chill. So what do you think it is?
That's interesting. In some ways, I feel like I'm kind of an avatar for what parkour was in like the late noughts and early 2010s. I think Callum is like this too. There's a couple people whose personalities reflect where the community was. Um, and a lot of my not in a I am parkour way, but I think that sort of my natural way of being and where the sort of culture and spirit of the sport were at that time lined up very intuitively. So it didn't feel like I had to change much at all to match or like map onto the spirit of the sport. Now it's a little bit different because the culture has shifted. And so I think what in some ways maybe would be my difference or sort of like the facet that doesn't map on as clearly is my nerdiness. And I think that the weird philosophical OCD obsessions that we had back in the day defined my early parkour experiences. Like, I mean, I remember getting on message boards and people are talking about, okay, you know, who creates a better philosophical framework for a parkour athlete, Heidegger or Sartre? Or is it actually Camus? And like those conversations don't really happen in the space anymore. But that was the stuff that I loved. And even when I was a 14-year-old kid that discovered the sport, that was actually what attracted me to the community and what drew me in is like, oh, these people are really nerding out hard and trying to sort of excel in every aspect of their life, like physical, mental, spiritual, or emotional as well. And yeah, I love that about the sport, and I definitely still, I think, am very down to get into that type of conversation now.
Me too.
And I play banjo, so that's my other nerdy thing.
Banjo, that's sick. I didn't even know that. Um, no, that makes so much sense. And one thing I just want to share real quick because this is important to me is I always have felt that you would be so good at commentating in the sport. I would love to see you do more of that at competitions and stuff because you know who everybody is and you are like so nerdy. You know all the moves, you know, you're just in the know with everything and you're really articulate too. And so I want to see that for these competitions. I want to see Max Henry being commentator.
Thanks. Yeah, maybe Joey and Doey do such a great job at SPL, and they're so entertaining. I'm definitely more boring, but you know what I would be great at is the job that Dom and David Ehrlich had last year is the sort of athlete interviews because I do know everybody. And there's a lot of times that, yeah, it's hard to know everybody and it's hard to have questions and
Yeah.
things like that. But I would love to do that if Dom and Rez are
Yeah.
listening. Feel free to invite me.
Okay, so let's get into your parkour journey a little bit. You've been doing it for like over 20 years. Am I correct about that?
Close to 19 now. Yeah. I
Yeah.
started in early 2007.
Okay, so can you like rewind to your childhood and tell me a little bit about what that was like and what kind of got you inspired to do parkour in the first place?
Totally, yeah. So what a lot of folks who are listening might not know is I was a gymnast as a kid. So I was a competitive gymnast. I started gymnastics when I was 2 or 3 because my parents said that I just jumped all over the place, was falling and watching Ninja Turtles and trying to do it all the time. So they put me in gymnastics. And yeah, I competed until I was 10. Uh, when I was 10, my team won states. I got second in New York State overall, and then I got 15th in the Eastern Seaboard in men's gymnastics for that age group. And then I had a couple of gnarly bails back to back where I like bailed a giant, landed on my neck, got super scared, was tired and like undercooked a back handspring and had a weird bail. And I just kind of was like, I think I'm out of here. Not a big fan anymore, and took a break from that. But because of that background, that type of athleticism obviously was like really fascinating to me. And I liked watching movies and stuff. And in 2007, my best friend from high school, saw a David Bell video on the news. David Bell was coming to New York later that year, so they were doing a feature on parkour, and he couldn't remember what it was called. So we were like looking up all kinds of things on YouTube, trying to figure it out. And eventually we searched like guy jumps off building and survives, or Spider-Man guy jumps off building and survives. And that was the search that yielded En avance toujours et vous, which was the first David Bell video that I saw. And yeah, we like went out to the local elementary school right after that. I mean, like literally like paused the video, logged out of the library computer, went across the street to the elementary school, and just like hucked ourselves over a fence for 2.5 hours or something, like trying to do parkour. And it was definitely, it was love at first sight for me. I think the David Bell video felt a little bit more stunty. So actually, this is a lie. I'm gonna revise my previous thing. It was not the David Bell video that we paused. We watched several more related videos and then paused it, because the one that got me was a Cambridge parkour video by a practitioner who doesn't really train anymore. But the David Bell videos felt like stunts. And I remember watching the Cambridge guys, and it was just like a normal training day YouTube video right when YouTube had first come out. And it made it feel approachable and like a methodology. And then I started kind of really digging in after that first session into the community and culture, and realized like, oh, there's all these other people who are interested in philosophy and math and science and martial arts and all of these sort of like branches of movement and human development. And they're tying those things together into the practice of parkour. And yeah, it felt like the first place where I could fully express every facet of myself. I played a lot of sports as a kid, but gymnastics, there's no philosophy behind gymnastics anymore, in competitive gymnastics at least. And I played baseball and ran track and all these other things. And the sort of like the sporty stuff stayed sporty, the nerdy science stuff stayed nerdy, and never the twain shall meet. And parkour is the first thing where I felt like both of the sort of core parts of my being could combine and flourish in a community that wanted to embrace both of those things.
Wow, what a beautiful answer. I mean, that just makes so much sense too. And I can see it like with the type of athlete that you are and the way that you relate to life and everything. I'm like, this is actually just the perfect sport. And since you've been doing it for so long now, 19 years, what do you feel like has kept you able to practice it that long and kept you wanting to practice it that long?
It's just infinite. Like it's an infinite rabbit hole to explore for me. I think parkour was completely goalless when I started. So I think when I went into the sport, the practice, like trying to think of a good way to phrase this, it was like the training was the output, or like the practice was the event. So playing sports, I always loved practicing baseball. I didn't care if I won or lost in the game, and that was detrimental to my performance in every sport that I ever did. It's like I'm just not inherently I think I'm competitive, but I don't find that I'm not motivated by that situation to perform at my best. And parkour, there was no game. It was like the game is practice. You practice and practice and practice. Or I guess the game is life if you look at it at the broadest level, because you're always practicing for something. And I think that the infinite game that parkour presented was really beautiful and inspiring to me. And I think I just like inherited or embraced that to such an extent that has just become foundational for my practice moving forward. So even on days where like I really underperform to what I want, it's kind of like it's easy for me to get into a headspace of, oh, I could have done nothing today and I went out and did something. So I got to train being bad at parkour on a day when I'm tired, or like, oh, I got to train at being less technically able than I usually am and seeing how my body responds in these situations. And I think that like that early parkour framing of everything is training, like every session, even when it's unsuccessful, is presenting you with an opportunity to experience being unsuccessful or experience being clumsy or dealing with whatever adversity those are all part of the training because there is no goal. The goal is just to put yourself in as many situations as you can and constantly adapt and improvise and learn. So, I mean, that's like, I'm not like, yeah, Mr. Golden Sunshine every session. I get frustrated and stuff. But at the end of the day, I think it lasts for like an hour. And my wife, Christine, would tell you that I'll be pissed off or something and come in, and 30 minutes later, it's like, oh, where should we go out tomorrow? Or, oh, maybe I'll like go on a run and then do a little balance. Like, there's always just a new way to fit it into my life.
Mm.
And yeah, I think it's an infinite game. So it's hard for me to feel like I lose interest in it.
Yeah, I can really relate to that last one too, of like being frustrated at a session and then getting over it quite quickly. It's like, all right, we're just gonna move on now. But that's such an underrated mindset to just be like, well, at least I went out and I trained today. And I love how much it exposes us to adversity and to like getting over fear. That was something that always kind of rooted me more into it, is I always had to deal with fear if I wanted to get better. And I
Mhm.
wanted to ask you, because you had that situation where you had some bad bails, did that ever translate in your parkour journey at all? Did you ever like, I don't know, kind of have that come up almost as like a PTSD experience where because that happened when you were in a formative year, that it was like something that was a struggle in your parkour journey?
Yeah, I've been lucky that the sort of injuries that I've had have not been so severe that they've taken me out of training the sport completely. So I've had a few that were like, oof, this is gonna force me to reassess what I thought I was capable of.
Hmm.
I mean, I remember the most obvious one is because I do a lot of rail jumps and things like that in my training. I had one where I was on an indoor setup doing a drop precision to a rail. So rail to rail, trying to stick it. And the rail that I was jumping off of hadn't been fastened securely. So as I jumped, it just pushed back like a foot, and it completely sapped the output that I'd put in. So I was like, oh, I'm going to give it just enough to make it to the rail. And I just, yeah, lost that energy. And I remember in the air, just reaching my feet out, and I'm like, I still can't even touch the rail. And I did like a 12-foot drop free to my taco position on my ribs. And yeah, it was really, luckily got away with like one or two cracked ribs, but nothing else. And that was one of those where like it was an injury, but it also made me reassess my training a little bit and just made me a little bit more aware. Um, Other than that, I don't feel like I think my ability to sort of refresh my brain every day and like control alt delete some of my bad experiences, or just like toxic positivity myself into not worrying about them, is both a superpower and a curse. So I think it's helped me not suffer from any like lasting impairment from injury, but I think it's also what often makes me feel more complacent, because I can just be like, you know what? I could put in maybe 5 or 10% more, but I don't know if I'm willing to accept that potential, like that increased risk or whatever it is. And at the end of the day, like, I'm glad I got this far today. And I think that separates me often from, somebody like a Nate Weston, or like Dylan Baker, who I trained with so much back in the day. And he always just had like a fire to finish the thing. And the negative, like the drawback of goalless training, is that like, since you don't have a goal, you really don't have that impetus to finish the thing.
Yeah, I can relate a lot to that these days with my training. And since you have that, I wanted to talk about the power of that too, because like we had said on the last podcast, it's like you've been able to train smart and be relatively injury free for the past 19 years, which is kind of unheard of in parkour because a lot of us like to, we just don't know our limits. So how do you find that also like really, really powerful in the sense that what did you say? You said something like, nothing in parkour ever needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing in the sport ever, it's goalless, right? So it's like, if I'm looking at a roof gap, every circumstance that I create around that is completely arbitrary. That's saying I need to do this,
Mm.
because I don't. And it's always been something that's fascinated me, even back to the originators of parkour. They would create these stakes for themselves, and David Bell in old interviews would talk about, I would imagine my mother in a burning building and she's across the roof gap and they have to jump the gap. And I'm like, dude, just go spend time with your mom now, like in house, like help her do the laundry or something. You don't need to create this artificial scenario where you're saving somebody. And maybe they did at that time and like that helped them feel empowered. But I've always struggled to put myself in a position where circumstances didn't feel completely contrived. And that has helped me, I think, achieve a good amount of longevity in my practice. I think it's also held me back in a lot of ways from maybe tapping into the highest potential that I could reach, because you do need a certain amount of willingness to set those stakes for yourself when you don't need to. So yeah, I guess the positive there is it's easy. It makes it easier to achieve the clarity that you need to acknowledge when you're not ready to do something and to step away from it. And it also makes that a less emotional decision because you're not as invested in the outcome in that moment. So you're not judging yourself negatively or positively when you make the decision to go, oh, I'm not ready today. And I think that's really powerful. And that can help you develop incredible self-confidence and trust in yourself to say like, oh yeah, I know that if I actually don't want to do this or don't feel up to it, I am going to step away because I've done it 100 times before. And there are a lot of challenges that I've looked at and not done that day. And then I do come back and do them later. And I feel fully capable and safe and able in those situations. And likewise, there's a lot of challenges that I have marked down that I'd like to do that I probably will never do because I don't know that that day will ever come where I can convince myself that it's a smart decision, given knowing that I could walk away without anything happening to me in any other facet of my life and not do the thing when there's any risk of injury or whatever, especially with a kid and a wife and stuff. It's like if you have a job and family and you break your leg doing something that at the end of the day, no one's paying you for, it is 100% on you to make that decision, completely arbitrary. It doesn't feel great.
Yeah, I love.
And often I've leaned in the direction of I would rather be 5% upset at myself for not committing and 95% okay with walking away versus 95% regretting a major injury that's like going to change my life for the next 6 months.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that. I feel like the reason I like that so much is because sometimes I have a hard time being okay with that, with where I'm at now, because I was so used to being on the other side of that, very heated and like emotional behind my training, like taking it personally on myself if I wasn't able to do something. But giving that permission that like, hey, it's also okay to just walk away and know your limits and all that is just like, I don't know, it's just really, really refreshing. So thank you for clarifying that. And I also want to point out too that Richard and I were just talking about this the other day. You were also really, really good. You are now, but at one point we were saying that you were probably one of the best in the world at parkour. And I really, really believe that about you because like some of the stuff, like your tech and your capability of being able to do like all these challenges that everybody wants to do, I've always been blown away by it. And it's like, even though you say it's goalless training, there is something in you that is motivated enough to be out there doing it all of the time. And some of my best training sessions have been with you. They're just so fun because you have that carefree attitude and it inspires everybody else around you. So just want to thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. I also think it's good to say like goalless doesn't mean you never challenge yourself. I think if I go back to calling it parkour as an infinite game, a fun game is challenging. It wouldn't be any fun to play basketball if the hoop was right next to you every time, and the ball was like way smaller than the hoop. Sorry, I'm like dying. It wouldn't be any fun to play a game where, yeah, there's no restriction that challenges you. So I definitely try to live daily in a space where like my training is challenging and interesting. I think Callum and the guys when they're doing one of the store podcasts, they were talking about foot placement And Callum, which I was very appreciative of, brought me up as in the conversation for having one of the best foot placements in the parkour scene. And I think it was Max and Benj were like, yeah, but he's never really tested it the way that somebody like Phil or Dylan Baker or Endies has, or Cosmian. And I 100% agree. And I think that's actually a great, like that description is exactly what makes me happy about my training, is like I've never felt the need to test it. And particularly if that desire isn't coming from you and instead it's coming from like, oh, I heard Ben say that my rail strides are good, but I've never done it 10 feet up. So I'm going to go prove him wrong. Like that is just, for me personally, at least, a really bad space to go into anything from, and not a space that I want to tap into for my parkour training. So yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. And I feel like um, because I've been able to sort of slow burn my self-trust and build this relationship where like I know I can walk away when I am intrigued by a challenge and I make the decision to commit to it. I feel really confident in that decision, because I know that in the back of my head, if it wasn't a smart choice, I would just say, whatever. I'll get it another day.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's just so perfect. I wanted to go back to like earlier when you were talking about working on the movie Tracers. I
Yeah.
My favorite part about that is you doubling Josh Yaden. I just think that's amazing. And so
That
please.
was the funniest. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, I mean, most of the people I'm sure listening will probably be aware of Josh, but if they're not, he is an amazing parkour athlete and stuntman. And particularly at that time, what he was doing in parkour was wild. For whatever reason, well, they gave him an acting role, which I was very happy about. But at the time, I had done acting my entire childhood through college. And the irony that Josh, who is a very well regarded stunt person, got the acting job, and that I was hired to double him with no stunt experience whatsoever and no ability to replicate like 50% of the thing. I mean, he was doing like roll bombs out of window, like dive thread roll bombs on ships where like you couldn't really mat it up. And it was a very run and gun production. And like I would say most stunt coordinators would not probably have okayed a lot of the setups that we were using. And they'd be like, we need to get a couple more takes, but Josh is going to be, whatever, with the other team shooting some dialogue. Can you do that? And I was like, no. I mean, there's like two people in the world who can do what he just did. He's one of them. And then Daniel Ibaka. Like, I don't know. There's not anyone else around that's about to do some messed up like thread roll out of a window to 15-foot drop roll bomb with no map.
Hey, real quick before you continue, this is so funny. That just reminds me, basically every time I get hired for a commercial, they always like I get there and they're like, "Yeah, we got Sydney. That's great." And they're like, "Can you do this thing where you backflip and grab onto a pole and slide down?" I'm like, "No, if you want that, you need to hire Joe Scandrett."
Yeah. Yeah. There's one person that I guarantee, maybe Stas. Yeah, he might be down to do it. But yeah.
But yeah, I always think about that. And yeah, I always think back to tracers and stuff. But other than that, did you enjoy working in stunts, or like how did you feel?
No, I hated it, honestly. I love the paycheck. That was great, but it was like the antithesis of everything that I did in my training, and it was really hard for me to take. We've been talking about how sort of casual my approach is, and stunts, there is a goal, and like you're expected to sacrifice everything to achieve that goal within reason. And that was just like so anathema to how I pursued parkour that it was really hard for me to combine those two things. Particularly like in the context of that production, I think there was just like a lot going on, and yeah, I found it really challenging.
Mm.
So it gave me a lot more respect for people who are doing that as their career. And I also think in the context of movement, particularly, I'm not really a team player. So it was really hard for me to get behind the like, well, you just gotta, like I hurt my ankle and as you talked about, and I was like, I probably would want to rest this for a month to 6 weeks. And they wanted me back on set in 5 days. And Josh was like, I've got a bunch of like braces and help me tape it up and brace it up. And we shot on it for another week. But that still to this day restricts my mobility. And that is not worth the $15,000 additional payment to me that I got for that. So there were a lot of those little choices where I'm like, oh, if I was in this as a career, I would not last very long, because that even in that situation, at one point, they were asking me to do certain things like, oh, can you do this like 10-foot roof gap? It's like, no, like you can fire me. I don't actually care. I'm literally just here for the paycheck. Like I don't care about anything else. Like I'm not trying to do this as a career. I don't care if you like go and talk smack about me in the industry. Like that's totally fine. I would rather preserve my body. And if I'm taking risks, do it with complete, control on my end. So I was a terrible stunt person. Yeah, I would not hire me. And still to this day, like if you're listening and you're a stunt coordinator, do not hire me by any means. Like I would be great on production in many other capacities. I would be actually probably a phenomenal choreographer because I did help a lot with that, and I really enjoyed that. And being such a parkour nerd, like that, the choreography aspect was really, really exciting to me. But the execution of it, I was just like, nope, this is very, very wrong personality to be good at that job.
Yeah, it's not for everybody. And I wanted to make a podcast episode about like what it's really like to work in stunts, because I think a lot of people get into parkour and they're like, yeah, that sounds amazing. It sounds like so much fun. I think Callum described it as like borderline prostitution because you're getting paid to just like wreck your body.
Yeah, it can be. I
Yeah.
mean, actually, so I'll take this back. The American Eagle job that I did. So I did an American Eagle campaign where they wanted parkour stunts. And that was phenomenal. Like that team, the production team was amazing to work with. It was actually parkour. So I was unlike in Tracers, where they did a parkour casting. And then they're like, can you do this 35-foot fall onto cardboard boxes? And it's like, no, I'm completely untrained for that. Like that's horribly dangerous for me to be doing. Or like, they're like, oh, we need somebody to do wire work. No, I'm not going to do that. That's a terrible idea. Hire a stunt person. Don't hire a parkour athlete. The American Eagle job was great. So I do think it's like very job dependent. If you're hired for something that you're able to do, very different experience. And for me, then when I was like completely overwhelmed working on a full production as a stunt professional.
There's massive differences too. Job to job is so different. Like I've had jobs that I can describe the same sort of feelings. Like I just hate this. I'm here literally for the paycheck. But then I've also had the opposite where it's like I wish I could do this every single day of my life forever. I would be so happy. So it's one of those things that just is job dependent,
Yeah. I feel so bad for Gabe if he ever listens to this. Gabe, bless you for dealing with me because he was spearheading the stunt team on that. And yeah, man, Gabe and Josh were really, they probably heard a lot from me that they were like, I don't know who should be vocalizing this on set.
Whatever. It was way back when. I feel like a movie like Tracers, you can get away with a little bit more. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about you being so community oriented. Like you've done so much for the sport. You wrote the parkour roadmap. You were leading workshops around the time that I met you, and I joined in on one of those in 2018. It was so much fun, and I actually still implement some of the stuff that we did that day, like some of the conditioning stuff. I still do that sometimes when I don't know what to work on. I'm like, I'm going to do wall runs and then do this, and like I don't know, it's so good. And then also you started Point A Parkour, so I wanted to get into kind of like why you started doing things like this to help other people in the sport.
Wow. Well, coaching, actually, I was going to say coaching started fine. It actually has never, that drive has always been really organic. I think when I started parkour, there were so many community focused resources. It seemed like everybody in the sport just wanted to grow the sport because it was at a time where people would ask what you're doing and you'd say parkour, and they would have never heard the word before, and then you'd explain it and they would have no frame of reference because it wasn't like, oh, have you seen The Office or have you seen whatever, this movie or that movie, or it's like, oh, it's in stunts, when people are like, there's no frame of reference for it. So everybody in the sport at that time, it felt like to me, was very invested in building the sort of infrastructure of the community. And so it felt natural to get into coaching, and I ran just jams and classes at the local park, which is actually how David Ehrlich got started, who now runs the Commons, and Vinny Vinciguerra from Unknown Parkour, and a couple of the other Long Island guys that are still really active in the scene. Marlon Johnson, who helped run Woodward East for a little bit. So things like that. Also seeing, a community grow up and being able to influence them, it was just very motivating. Like that in itself was incredibly motivating. And I also feel like there's such an opportunity in the sport. It's amazing to be in a position where your voice can have any impact on how other people perceive an activity. And I have lucked into that position. And I think that to me, it feels like there's a certain level of responsibility that comes with that to help uplift other people's voices, which was a big motivation for Point A, was to try and take some time to focus on stories that are not just like the ones that are being told in 15 seconds on Instagram, or, even the ones at that time that were being told on YouTube. And yeah, I think that workshops, I mean, now even I'm so passionate about trying to do more coaching or workshops or exposure in general with athletes who are not parkour athletes, but maybe are parkour adjacent, because I see so much potential for crossover with, climbing or skateboarders or fitness professionals and obstacle course racing. Like it's really such a universal, some parts of the skill set are so universal. And I think that a lot of parts of the philosophy people really resonate with and can find value. So yeah, I don't know if I answer your question, but I feel like I've always been intrinsically motivated to try and give back what I received in the early days as much as I can.
Yeah, no, that's special. I really do appreciate them. And obviously, like, I've watched a lot of the Point A production videos, and the ones that always stick out to me are obviously you have a poster of it in your background, Queen City and Gatecrasher, exposing how women are in the sport, because a lot of times you search parkour girl and the worst video ever comes up where it's like what's it called? It's like, it's got that guy that's like chasing.
Bold guy, or like is it bold guy and parkour girl or something? Oh man, I can't remember the exact title, but yeah.
And it's just a horrible video. The parkour is shit. And it's just like, yeah, it's not for kids, and it's not for girls that are like watching that video, as a teenager. They're like, oh, are there any women that like do parkour? And so I really appreciate now that when you search like parkour girl, you might see Queen City or Gatecrasher up on there too. And those films, what I really, really like about Queen City too is it's just like, it's people that aren't necessarily doing it professionally. It was a lot of the women, like they're just doing it in addition to the lives that they already have, and they're making it fit with their job that they have or their school or whatever it may be, and it's just a lifestyle that they get to participate in. So that's something that really sticks out to me, that I think about a lot, and how much that might inspire young women to get involved in the sport. Because as you know, like at parkour gyms especially, if you're a young girl and you come in, you're going to see that the class is like 90% men. You're like, oh, where are the girls at? So it's really, really nice to be able to have content like that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think with Point A, it's interesting because Gatecrasher was the project that I had the least direct involvement with, because it was really produced and directed by Renee Dombley and Lisa Schneider, and Toby edited it pretty much completely. So I helped a ton with pre-production, and then I shot in Budapest with them for a week. But that intent was like Renee and Lisa wanted to make an action film. And my goal with Queen City, when I started dating Christine, is I looked at the landscape of parkour content, particularly regarding like representation. And it had become such a like, let's make content about representation as opposed to making content about people. And then that content is representative of people, because I was like, it felt like every conversation around women in parkour, the emphasis was, what is your experience as a woman in parkour? And I just wanted to, because my experience training with people like yourself and Christine and Alyssa Serpa and Tam is I just had fun training with y'all. And I wanted to show what that experience was like in a way that didn't make the viewer feel like they even really had to think about gender too much. And it comes up a little bit, but the intent was mostly just like, here's a group of people training together who all have different styles, who all are kind of at different skill levels and points in their life. And, the goal is for the viewer to be able to connect with at least one of those. And in some ways, I think it's interesting because it's made point A less accessible almost, because like something like Gatecrasher is so spectacular and engaging and captivating that like in our media ecosystem, that is more likely to get the 500,000 views and actually bring more people into the sport. But then you hope that their 10th or their 15th or their 20th video that they see, at least I hope, is more something like Queen City, or, we did the long game, which is like a 6.5-minute film with Howard Palmer talking about parkour over 40. And the whole point of that one was like, a lot of people see parkour over 40 as not a gimmick, but it's like, oh, look at those people who are a little bit older and they're trying parkour. And he was like, no, I'm going to bust my ass to be the best athlete that I can. And I just happen to be over 40. So it's more of like my goal is to kind of tell maybe something that's like slightly adjacent to what folks might get from the 10 or 15-second Instagram clip or the action edit. And yeah, it's not for everybody, but I think the people who do get deep enough to get that, maybe that's kind of like the nutrition that will sustain the community. Because yeah, I mean, Instagram and social media and stuff is like the fast food of content. And at a certain point, like that will burn out, and you need to have a little bit more structure, or a little bit, I guess, like deeper purpose in the stuff that you're creating and the stories that you're telling about a community for it to really grow potentially in a more sustainable, lasting manner.
Yeah,
I don't know if I actually execute that, but that's at least the goal with what we do.
you definitely do. And and you said something, and it made me think a lot about this too, because as far as Instagram and all that is concerned, I remember like when I started to get a lot of traction on Instagram, it was me just posting my training clips every day. And a lot of times I would include the bails, and like that would really blow up. And a lot of the people that were engaging with these videos, like the ones that have gone super mega viral for me, like I don't necessarily like the audience that has come from that. I will be honest. Yeah. And then when I share a little bit more about my story, it gets no views, as in like, I don't want to say no views, but it gets so significantly less, maybe even 1% of what those videos get. However, it affects people differently.
Mm-hmm.
That's like what I think of in terms of like Queen City and stuff. Of course, Gatecrasher is spectacular. And, Triple Threat, like a lot of parkour people can really resonate with Jared's story. But it's also like, it's getting into those deeper stories that allow people to see themselves in it. And that's way more meaningful than just like, here's some cool jumps and some flips. And I really appreciate storytelling. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, everything has its place. But, I look at, again, I mean, I think sustainability in the sport, when you're asking me about sort of my motivation for being involved in the community, I have found parkour to be so pivotal in my formation as a person, and so helpful, honestly. Like the philosophy and ethos of the sport when I started, which I do think was different, or is different than it is now. I think it's such a powerful philosophy that was behind the sport. And as we have made an effort as a community to kind of involve more people, I think some of that has kind of gotten dumbed down, not as necessarily even as a conscious choice, but just like you see what performs well. Oh, it's the bails. Oh, it's getting all of the training highlights in as quickly as possible with a little bit less context. And then very quickly, you also lose the spaces like back in the day, the internet forums where people were, having these debates about the ethics of like training on rooftops, or how you present parkour in mass media and what kind of stories should deserve more space and highlighting. And all those things have kind of just contributed to like weaker roots than personally like I would like to see, because I do think it is such a inaccessible sport when it's shared in maybe like a more conscientious or thoughtful way. And obviously, it's great to have the things that get 20 million views. I mean, the fact that Dom and Joe are out there sharing these incredibly viral clips is great because it shows the sport at its highest level and it gets people's attention. And I just hope that as a community, we're putting as much effort into building the sort of infrastructure layer or content layer or storytelling layer beneath that for the people to kind of get the bait and then come down and see that there's more to it and not just think that that is the entirety of the sporting culture. So yeah, I think I'm trying to kind of live in that sub basement, building that layer of content, and the work that I do in the community definitely lands more in that space.
Oh, perfectly said. I know that we have to start thinking about like wrapping up on time soon, but one thing I wanted to ask you is obviously you're a new dad, which is so amazing. I'm so happy for you and Christine. By the way, I absolutely love Christine. Can you just tell her how much I love her?
Now she has to listen to this one. This is
Yeah, I
you
hope
just
she's listening to this because
you
Christine,
just hooked her.
I adore you. Anyway, I adore the both of you, and I'm so glad that you guys are parents because I've always thought, wow, they're going to be amazing parents. And yeah, just even sitting here talking to you about this conversation, I'm like, wow, what a lucky kid. So I wanted to ask you kind of what parenthood has been like for you and how it's changed your perspective on life.
Oh man, it's awesome. I think the best way, maybe the most interesting thing that I didn't really digest before actually seeing and holding my daughter is that there are very few like completely binary moments or like just complete branching pathways that you hit in your life. So many things are gradual, and there's very few things where you're like, oh, this person is now in the world. Every single decision that I will now make moving forward is 100% different than it was before. And yeah, it maybe intellectually, but sort of the emotional experience of that and seeing her and you're just like actually feeling it at a gut level. Yeah, that was wild. But with that, I mean, it's just the coolest thing. Like all of the stereotypes that people say are so true. And she's like my favorite little person in the whole world. And like everything that she does is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And it's so rad. And it's actually like, it's also great because as she gets older, I just am more excited to spend time with her because she does more stuff and she can start to communicate. So she's almost 2 now. And when you're like, have a little potato, you're like, oh, this is cool. But it's kind of like you can't interact. And then she starts being able to point to stuff or crawl around and express that she wants to do a thing. And that's exciting. And then they start to develop more words and walking around. And now she's like sassing me and Christine all the time. And it's hilarious. And yeah, it's really cool. If anything, the toughest thing is now you kind of like she's at the point where there's more like restrictive parenting that has to happen where you're like, okay, I have to be a little bit harder on you because you're old enough to conceptualize no or some consequences of what you're doing, but you're young enough that you can't make these decisions for yourself. And when they're super young, it's kind of like some of that tough love, just they don't know what's going on. So you don't really have to worry about it as much. And then now she's getting older. So it's kind of like, okay, we're going to have to do some actually doing the like behavioral adjustments. And that's the hardest part is because you're like, I love you so much. I hate having to say no to you or be really strict with you about this thing. But obviously you have to do it and set those boundaries so that they can learn to set boundaries for themselves. But yeah, I mean, overall, like if you are going into, luckily we're also in a position where like Christine and I were like in a good spot as in a relationship to have a kid. We wanted to do it. It was planned. We were financially able to handle it, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of the stressful variables around having a kid, I think we had taken into account and we were prepared for. So that also makes it a lot different than if suddenly you're like thrust into parenthood. Obviously that experience would be totally different, but I'm sure that satisfaction and sort of just like emotional jolt of having something happen in your life that is makes every day going forward like irrevocably different is the same.
I got goosebumps when you said that because you were talking about like most things being gradual, and then this is like absolutely not that. And wow, yeah, I really felt that, but I just felt like how much you guys love her, and it really, like, I almost teared up. You guys are so sweet, and everything she does being the coolest thing in the world. I've been so excited about parenthood one day, and I just love hearing people's experiences of it because it seems like everyone says the same thing. They're all like, yeah, it opens up a level of love that you didn't know you had.
Yeah. It also opens up a level of being able to deal with sleep deprivation that you didn't know you had.
I bet. That was going to be my next question is how do you balance everything in life?
Yeah, we're lucky that we're able to get childcare for her during the day. So she does daycare because Christine and I are both working full time. And that is incredibly helpful. And we're very appreciative that we have that option. Um, Before that, when she was younger, I mean, it is just a constant kind of adjusting of expectations. So a big part of why I am not pushing myself as much is just that first year she was a particularly bad sleeper as a child, as an infant. And so there were like weeks where you're getting, 10 hours of sleep in a week, maybe 7 hours of sleep in a week. And in those situations, you're just like anything that I do, even if it's going out for a walk, feels like such a win. And your athletic standard completely drops away. And then now things are a little bit more normalized and I can have a little bit more of a schedule. It's a bit easier. But in general, yeah, I tend I'm not a planner. I've become more of a planner because you know that when if I'm done working and I need to get something done, I'm not going to pick up my phone and scroll Instagram or hop on YouTube. And like, you know that you want to spend time with your kid. That time is much more precious. And so the time that you have to yourself is also much more precious. And I think it has helped me crystallize what I want to spend time doing in my day. And whether that's sometimes taking time to yourself and just reading for 30 minutes, or yeah, sometimes it is just like, I really want to just watch a story video or like scroll Instagram and see what my friends are up to for 25 minutes. That time is really nice and it's conscious and more conscious for me at least. And then same thing with my training time. It's feels like such a blessing when I do get to go out with friends and session. So I don't know if that answered your question.
No, perfect. I mean, I've been hearing that from so many people that have become parents, and they're like, what was I doing with my time before that? It's like, it's
Oh
become,
my God. Yeah. There's, I think back to like when I was in the van and remembering like, wow, I really want to hike today, but I also want to train. How can I do all of those things? Like I had infinite time. What was I doing? I could have done it in so many projects.
you know, it's like one thing that I realize about myself now that I tend to be like, oh my God, because I have all this time and I get like almost overwhelmed by it. So I end up not doing a whole lot. And then I'm like, the day
Mm.
seems to just fly by. It's so fast. But parenthood, I'm sure, has a way of not only speeding things up, but then slowing it down, making you more present and conscious because it just has to adjust that way.
Yeah, they all have their own difficulties and yeah, you learn different lessons from everything. And yeah, parenthood though, overall, 10 out of 10 would recommend to anybody who is thinking about it and is in a position to do it by choice and responsibly. In those circumstances, absolutely recommend.
Amazing. Max, thank you so much for this insightful conversation. I'm really, really grateful to get to spend this time talking to you. And of course, I hope to get to see you and Christine and Margot very, very soon. Always love seeing you guys and hanging out. So, yeah, thanks again for being here. And yeah, thank you everybody for listening.
Thanks for the opportunity and for picking my brain.